Hello, everyone, and welcome to our wonderful lesson today. I have something super special for you. So if you just started joining us, write down. I'd like to see where you're from and what's your name. So please write it in the comments. What is your name and where are you joining us from? It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, so I'd like to see if you're joining. What's your name? Where you're from? Hello, Rogerio. Hello, Wissam. Good evening. Hello, different time zones. Welcome to our lesson. Welcome, Patricia. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I have a wonderful lesson for you that I'm very excited to teach because these are things that I hear all the time and I've heard throughout many years of teaching, and I want to address them because I think it's very important when it comes to language teaching. Okay, so wow, we have such a beautiful group today. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you. And if you are joining us later, please also write your name and where you're writing from, because we have such a wonderful group of students from all over the world, and hopefully can keep getting bigger and we can get to know each other. Okay, so here's our little lesson. It's about misconceptions. Misconceptions is kind of it's a long word, and it's a very important word, but it's a very, very, very good one to know. Misconceptions about language learning. So I want to ask you right now if to write in the comments, what do you think misconception means? Do you know this word? Have you heard it? What context have you heard it in? What does this word mean? Misconceptions. What do you think? I want to see if you guys know. Thank you again for joining. If you're just joining and you're wondering what's going on, what we're doing, we are writing about what we think misconceptions are, but we are also sharing what our names are, who we are, where we're writing from, because it's wonderful to share in this beautiful community. Okay, so I see some answers, wrong understanding, or I have no idea. Yes, you are right, Gosia. It is understanding something in the wrong way. So a misconception is an opinion or a view that is not correct, that is wrong. So you are correct in that sense. It's usually because we think we know something, but we don't know it. We think we're right, but maybe we're not completely correct. So it's something that's common, that many people believe, but it's usually just false, and sometimes there's some truth to it, but it's not completely true. So I want you to look right now on my screen where it says mistakes are bad. So a lot of people, I think, when they learn a new language, they're always scared. Oh no, I don't want to make mistakes. It's so bad to make mistakes. Well, that's actually a misconception that you have right here, because mistakes are good. I know you guys think I'm crazy probably, but it is good. They're good because if you make mistakes, you have the opportunity to learn from them. You have the opportunity to become better, to change those mistakes, and if you hadn't made it, maybe you couldn't correct it. So that is a misconception. That's an example right here. So that is what a misconception is. So are you ready to discuss some common misconceptions? What I want to ask you right now, before I show you the first one, let me switch here, is, okay, what do you think? The first one is related to time. How long does it take to learn a language? So in the comments, please write, how long do you think it takes how long do you think it takes to learn a language? How much time? What do you think? I'm so curious to see what everyone answers, okay? How much time do you think? Maybe 1 year, 1 month, 10 months, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? How long do you think it takes? Okay, so, and I will show you what I have. And my other question, which we can talk about a little bit later, is are you too busy to learn? Because I know we're all very busy. We all have work or children or opportunities and school and a lot of other things. And sometimes we feel like maybe we are a little bit too busy to learn a language. So let's see. Somebody says 600 hours. That's an interesting estimate. Okay. So see, some people say it depends on the way you learn it. It depends how much you. Yeah, I think you guys have some really, really good answers. Exactly. I also it definitely depends on how much time you're spending and you're putting in it. I also happen to think, and this is because this is valid for everyone, that it can take a lifetime. So let me share why I put this slide here. I've had numerous students ask me, even when I was in California teaching or in other places, and I've had students come and they said, teacher, how long will it take me to learn English, all the English? And it was kind of a funny question because you can't, they'll be like, oh, in 2 years will I be fluent, will I speak all the English? And it was kind of funny because the answer is no. Because you're never going to be 100%. You'll still make mistakes, and I think that's fine. I for me it seems like you're, even with English or with other languages, we're constantly learning. Even native English speakers, they're always learning about new words, they're learning about new concepts, new idioms. Everyone is always learning. So if we're thinking like, okay, I'm going to master this language in 1 year or so, I think that's a very difficult goal to accomplish. And if you have that goal for yourself, you might be disappointed if you don't reach it. So instead of thinking that way, it might be easier to just say, I'm starting to learn, and just focus on progress instead of, I will finish this language. Because it's not really possible to finish a language in a certain amount of time. And of course, some people make progress faster than others in different kind of skill. So some people's listening may advance further than others people listening, but maybe somebody else might be better at speaking. So it really does depend from person to person. And now my second question was, are you too busy to learn? This is something that, of course, as adults, we face a lot. We have so many obligations. We have so many things that we're doing. And sometimes if we want to learn a language, that keeps getting put on hold, and we say, oh, I didn't have time, let's do it tomorrow, let's do it next week, I'll do it next semester, I'll practice next month. So I wanted to address this because it's all about motivation, in my opinion. And in my experience, of course, because some of you may know that I had to learn English as well, you have time. Trust me. You have 10 minutes, you have 15 minutes a day. If you make that a priority, I think it's much, much better than not doing it at all. So you can spend that time by writing in your journal, or you can spend that time by speaking to yourself. Yes, you heard me correctly, to yourself. Or you can use that time by watching a YouTube video or like interactive English. Woo! Or doing just a little bit for yourself to progress in that language. So you do have the time. I think it's just hard for us because we think, I have to spend 2 hours, 3 hours just only studying English, and it's just not the case. Exactly. We must find the time. No excuses. Great, good, Gosia, thank you. So you have it. You just have to make sure you dedicate it. Okay, now my second question for you is about accent. Okay, this is my second misconception. This is an important one because I hear so many split opinions, but I'd like to see, and please write it in the comments, whether you're watching now or later, write down, how important do you think accent is? Do you think having an accent is important? Is it a problem? What do you think about it? How important do you find it? Because I want to see your opinions, and then I'll share mine, and then you can tell me what you think too. How important is accent? I will say this. I've been asked many times, is accent important? Like, is it important? And I would say, yeah, yes, it is. But not in the way you think. Accent is important, just like we learn a language to be able to communicate with other people. If accent stands in the way of that, then we're not communicating effectively in the language we're trying to communicate. So if people don't understand what you're saying, then it's important. But if they do and it sounds a little bit different, then I don't think it's that important. But of course, it's very, very, very important. If people don't understand you, you should try to correct yourself, because maybe you're stressing the word wrong. And this is what I wanted to discuss, that many people think that, oh, my accent is a problem. If you're learning a different language, pronunciation is about more than accent. It's about intonation, the way you end a word, or the way, like, you could have rising intonation or falling intonation, or it's the rhythm of the language, or it's a word stress, or there's so many aspects that come with pronunciation. It's not just the accent. So keep that in mind, because if somebody thinks, oh, my accent is so strong, it's so bad, it may be the way you are speaking that might be a problem more than your accent. So keep that in mind, okay? That's very, very important. It might not be the accent, but like I said, it is important if people can't understand you, of course. And in that case, if you see that somebody doesn't notice what you're saying, can't understand, can't grasp it, maybe try to correct that mistake. Other than that, there's so many people in the world that have different accents, they learn English in different countries. It doesn't matter where you learn it, as long as you can speak and everyone can understand most of the time. Okay. So I have a more controversial, I have even another controversial question for you guys. And my question is about grammar, okay? So I want to see, what do you guys think about grammar? Is grammar important? What do we think about it? Is it not? Linguists can't even decide on this one, so it is controversial. Some people say this, some people believe that, and I want to see what you guys think, because you're students and of course we care. So please write it in the comments. What do you think about grammar? How important is grammar when you are learning English? Let's see. How important is grammar? So I'm going to talk to you about two schools of thoughts while you guys write your answers. The first one is that some linguists talk about, which has to do with language immersion, and they say, you know what, grammar is not that important. People should just go to a country where the language is spoken and kind of start speaking, and eventually they will learn the language perfectly, and they don't even need to study grammar. Now, the problem with that is that if you make an error and it never gets corrected, you always say it, nobody corrects you, and you don't know the grammar rule, you can end up making that mistake forever. And that's called error fossilization, and it is a problem, right? Because you're not using the language correctly. So if you don't focus on grammar at all, that can be a problem. So let's see. Some people here say, of course, as I expected. I have some answers where grammar is very important. Grammar is not that important. It's important. So I completely understand why we have two camps, because like I said, even linguists don't agree who study second language acquisition. So they don't completely agree on this. But I will tell you my take in a second. Now I want to talk about the other camp of people, and especially this is taught in schools in many places in other countries or in the U.S. or I don't know about the U.K., but I know about the U.S. and the system and how it's taught there and in other countries because I've had students who've told me how they learned. And I know that there's so much focus on grammar. There's so much that it comes at a detriment to speaking, to developing your skills, like listening, like writing and reading. Many teachers just like to focus only on grammar and grammar only, and I understand it because people like rules, especially as adults. I think when we're learning a language, we want to be able to say it correctly, right? We want to speak correctly. We want to say, okay, I want to say this sentence, I want to say it right. I think the issue that comes with that is that when we do that, we don't focus on what we're supposed to be focusing on. I think a language is about speaking, it's about communication. It's not about 100% about saying it right. It's about actually being able to say it. And I think many teachers, especially in schools, they focus only on grammar. And in my opinion, grammar should complement the other skills. So for example, it should instead of only focusing on grammar, you should focus on grammar when you're speaking, try to say it correctly, or when you're writing, or when you're listening. Add it as a complement, not as a focus. Okay, so grammar should complement the way you're using the language, but it shouldn't be the primary focus. In a nutshell, we need a balance. You can't just focus on grammar. And I will tell you this. When I was in university, and it was my senior year, my last year of university at UCLA, where I studied, I took a language. I took Hungarian. And I took it because I was doing some research, and I took it for a whole year, a full year of Hungarian. And my teacher at the time only focused on grammar. We did almost no vocabulary, no conversation, nothing, just grammar, 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 grammar. So I knew how to conjugate verbs, I think, and do plurals and things like that. Oof. I'm a good learner. I was focused, but at the end of that year, I couldn't speak almost any Hungarian. I could write and translate, but I couldn't really speak almost any Hungarian. It was just that was my experience for me. So I think if you only focus on grammar, it's not a good way to learn a language. But I will say this: grammar is important. You do have to know the structure. You do have to know the structure of the language. You do have to focus on some of the rules, but don't just look at the rules. Use it as a complement. So I know you guys are sharing, and thank you so much for sharing. It's important in any language, yes. It's very important, I agree, but I would say that in some cases, especially in universities or schools, maybe there is a little bit too much focus on grammar as opposed to speaking. And we see it all the time. We've had students from different countries that can write something really well maybe, but they can't speak because they've never been able to practice that in school. Grammar is just a part of the language. The point is not to only focus on it. Okay, so my next misconception that I'm talking about is let's see here. It is about children. Okay, so before I show you, I want to know, this is something that I find that's again controversial. What do you think about children and learning languages? Is it easy for them to learn? Is it not? What do you think about children and language learning? So please write that in the comments because I hear this one all the time. Ta-da. Sorry. Okay, so children. So what do you think? Do children learn their first language in general, or languages effortlessly? Is it easy for them? What do you think? and I will tell you what the research is, kind of. So everyone's, yeah, because they're distractions. Yeah. So I think the consensus in many cases that I hear is it's easy for children to learn English, and I understand. I will say children learn languages really well, but the research indicates that it's not effortless. In fact, it takes children many years to learn a language. If you learn language acquisition, they don't just learn it like that. Children have to listen first, and then only after they can produce the language, they can speak it. And even after that, they end up making a lot of mistakes. So it's not effortless. It takes them a long time, and even when they're older they'll make mistakes, and this is how they learn. So the conception is, okay, children, they're so quick, they learn everything, but it's not effortless. That's something that's important. It's not that easy. They also take time, but we don't see that because it's all happening in their brains. But they do spend many years learning their first language and the second language, depending on what they grow up with. So it does take time, and they do make mistakes. For example, I was reading that even at 7 years old, children have difficulties creating passive voice sentences. So that's in obviously in English, in their native language, even at 7 years old. So that's after years of practicing their language. So this should make you feel good. Even children have a little bit of a hard time learning the language, right? Because we always think, oh, it's so easy for them. Well, this should make you feel good because it seems like they have a hard time. What I do want to say about children, and this is so important, the reason why children are so successful is because children have fun. They have fun with the language. They experiment with the language. They don't care about mistakes. They keep trying. We as adults, we need that willingness that children have. We need that willingness to experiment. We need fearlessness, right? We need to be fearless and just speak. And we need the willingness to make mistakes. And I know this is hard. I know it's hard to try to speak with somebody knowing that you might make a mistake and you're trying not to do it, but that's what we need to learn from children, right? Is to take that their way of learning and apply it, because guess what? It can help us. As adults, we have some advantages over children. We have a broader vocabulary. We have more of a structure. We have more motivation, possibly. So we can have an advantage a little bit. Of course, when it comes to pronunciation, I didn't put it on here, but children are better at pronunciation than adults, and that is true. That has to do with biology and the brain, and but we can still learn a language even as adults. Okay, so I think the underlying message of this lesson is no excuses, because everything I've been going through, time, accent, grammar, so far, none of these are real excuses for why you can't learn English. Okay, so that was my. Let's see what you guys are saying. Yes, so it does have to do something with the brain, but I think you guys are also right in mentioning that children really don't focus on mistakes, and they make it fun, they make it easy, which if we apply that to our method of learning, then that can benefit us as well. But it is a misconception saying that children have it easy. They don't even have to think about it. That's not true. They do think about it. It takes them a long time, and they do make mistakes. Okay. My next question, we can just talk about this. It's about talent or a gift. Some people say some people are gifted. It just means they have a natural talent for it. And I do hear this a lot. Some people say, oh, this person is so gifted with languages. They speak 7 languages. They speak 3 languages. Oh, you're so talented. maybe, but not really. The reason is many people in different parts of the world, they speak more than one language and they learn it at different stages of their life, and they're not gifted. They're not all gifted. It's impossible for everyone to be gifted. Like, I'm thinking about, like Switzerland, where they speak three languages immediately, just like that. In Northern Europe, in Africa, people speak oftentimes more than one language, and it's not because they're gifted. It's because they learn it and they grow up with it, or they have neighbors that speak other languages, or it's an official language. It's really not about being able to. It's not about capacity. It's not about anything like that. It's about willingness to learn. So I put here a little note for everyone. It's about attitude, not aptitude. So you have to want to learn a language, and I think if you really, really want to learn a language and you're invested, then you can definitely do really well. So this is another yes, there we go. 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Exactly. So it's that's exactly what it is. So this is another no excuses situation. Maybe some people may be a little bit more talented, but most people are not, and they can still do it. Everyone can do it if you're willing to put in the time and motivation. Okay. Now, my next question is, again, a little bit controversial. And oh gosh, I hear this all the time. And it is, do you have to speak with a native speaker, with a native speaker to improve your speaking, to improve your language? Is that necessary to your language development? So please write down what you think, yes or no, maybe. What do you think? Do you have to speak with a native English speaker to improve your English? Because I have heard this from many people, and everyone. I'll share my answer in a second. Doop, 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 doop. Okay. So if you're just joining, we are talking about misconceptions in language learning, and we are sharing if we think that you have to speak with a native English speaker to improve your language skills. If you're watching this later, please also write in the comments what you think, because we read everything and we love to hear your answers. So I'll say this. No. That's my answer. It's a short answer, but it's no. Not to improve. Of course it helps, but you don't have to speak to a native English speaker to improve your language English skills. In fact, many native speakers make mistakes, and they, depending on the area where they're from, they might not know the right answers. And just because they speak English and they've always been speaking English doesn't mean they can help you with your mistakes or can correct your mistakes. Or many times they end up speaking a lot more and you don't have, it's just like speaking with anyone. You don't necessarily have a chance to practice. So I don't think it's necessary. Of course, if you have the opportunity, it can help you, but to improve, to practice, you do not need this, okay? You can practice by yourself. It's really possible. You can speak in the mirror, you can speak to yourself, you can speak to friends, and they don't have to be native English speakers to be able to practice. In fact, I know so many people from other countries. Right now we live in a country that is, its first English is not, English, and the first language is not English, and so many people here speak flawless English, and most of them haven't had the opportunity to speak to native English speakers. We live in a world where you can Skype with people, there's so many different ways to practice that it just really doesn't have to be with a native English speaker. And some people just sound completely flawless. You can hear an accent, there's so many ways you can correct yourself. So another no excuse. Okay? So No excuse not to learn. So far, I've given you quite a few. Okay. Uh, the next question is connected, and it has to do with living. Okay, so where to live, and this is kind of a fantastic thing about being alive in the world that we live in today, and about the internet, because my question was, do you have to live where the language is spoken? And I know that maybe many years ago we didn't have the same opportunities and we had to go to a place. So for example, if I wanted to learn Spanish, I would have to go to um, Spain or to Argentina, or to try to perfect my Spanish. But now we have the internet, and we have some really wonderful opportunities. And as an example, just like I said before, so many people who live in other countries are fluent in English completely, and um, they've never traveled to an English speaking country, and they still can speak really, really well. Now I want to talk about the flip side of the coin, and because I've experienced this as a teacher. I've had students who, this was back in the US, which is obviously an English speaking country, and who, they traveled all the way from other countries, and they came to the US, and they thought, okay, this is how I'm going to improve my English. And of course they spent a lot of money doing this. They're traveling, they're taking English classes. The problem was, they weren't practicing outside of class, and they were just coming to class, doing whatever they could do, and then outside of class they would speak their language, make friends with people who spoke their language from their country, and all of the time they just spent using their language. So, and they were living in the US. This has happened for like a year, two, three. It If you live in a place, it doesn't mean that you will be fluent. Okay, so just living doesn't mean fluency. This is very, very important, because I think many people think that, oh, you have to just go to a country and it will, you'll be fluent. It will be great. Well, it's not so. Okay, it's like I said before about excuses. It's really about you and practice, and how much practice you are willing to put in. If you try, if you give your best effort, if you practice every day, if you are motivated, if you're dedicated, more than anything, you will improve. But you have to make sure to give that effort no matter where you live. So if you're in Iran, if you're from, let's see where you guys are from. If you guys wrote, if you're from India, if you're from Thailand, if you're from Italy, it doesn't matter where you are. It really doesn't matter. Russia, France. If you practice at home, if you practice in Brazil, if you practice in Portugal, if you practice in Spain, your English will improve. So another no excuses, okay? Sudan, yes, it doesn't matter. You can practice anywhere you are. And like I said, that's a beautiful thing about the world we live in today. Okay, so my last misconception has to do with classroom teaching. And this one may be different. You may have a different opinion on this depending on maybe your personality, or maybe depending on how old you are. And my question is classroom education, so going to a classroom, taking a class with a teacher, with other students, is it the most efficient way to learn a language? I'd like to know what you think. So please, if you're watching right now, write down, do you think is it the most efficient way to learn a language? If you're watching later, please write it in the comments. Is it the most efficient way? Do you think this is the best way, the easiest, just what will help your language development the most? What do you think? Okay, and if you're just joining, thank you for joining. We are talking about misconceptions, things that we believe to be true about language learning, but that actually aren't. Let's see. I will tell you some pros and cons, like I did with other subjects. So, first of all, there are some wonderful things about classroom teaching. As a person who teaches in the classroom, I love it. I love the interaction as a teacher, and when I was studying languages, I loved going to class. I will tell you why. First of all, if you have a good teacher, this is very important. You have to have a good teacher. If you don't have a good teacher, the experience won't be the same. But if you have a good teacher who is willing to help you, give you the tools, and they have a good structure, I think that's very important. You have a structure and you know kind of which way to go. So that's a pro. That's a good thing. Another really nice thing is, you have there's a social element. You can talk to other students, maybe you can practice. That's nice. So those are good things. Now, some bad things is that not all teachers are good, and this is very important. I've had some really, really bad teachers. I just went into class, they just started speaking, and I wasn't able to speak at all in the language, and it was more of a lecture, and it just wasn't. It wasn't great. I wasn't really learning, even though I was there. I was trying to. It wasn't really great, and some of these can be very expensive, and there are some problems with classroom teaching. Some of it can just focus on grammar. So I think it really, really depends on your teacher, but I think it also depends on yourself. What I mean by this is this quote I found here: languages cannot be taught. You can't teach a language, but you have to learn a language. So it's one of those things that you have to do yourself. Like I said before, it's something that is important. If you're motivated, if you're dedicated, if you want to learn, you have to do it yourself. Your teacher can only give you the tools, but you have to use those tools to develop your language learning. So that's really important. Let's see what you guys are saying. Yeah, sometimes it's not an advantage. So it really depends. Some teachers are just, they don't have maybe experience, or they don't know what they're doing, and maybe they're not helping. Others do, but there are pros and cons, but I would say that it ultimately depends on you. Okay, so I'm just going to go over very quickly about what we talked about, the misconceptions. We talked about time and how long it takes to learn a language, about accent and how important accent is. We talked about grammar. We talked about if you have to be gifted to learn a language, about children and is it easy for them to learn, about if you need to speak to a native speaker, where to live. Do you have to live in a country where the language is spoken? About how important is classroom teaching? And yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys. I think if you take one thing from this whole lesson, it should be that it really depends on you. If you're dedicated and willing to learn, then you can just avoid all of these things. You don't have to worry about speaking with a native speaker. You don't have to worry about living in another country. You just have to be really focused, and you have to do your best. And I truly, truly, truly believe, and I promise you that you will succeed. And I wanted to thank you so much for joining. And if you like this lesson, please share it with anyone you'd like, anyone you think this would be useful to. Write questions in the comments, and please join our social media classes. Thank you guys, as always, for watching us, and I will see you next time.